Imagine you are finally warm enough to close your eyes. The fire is still alive. The children have stopped crying. The rain has been hammering the rocks outside for 3 straight days, and for the first time all night, nobody is moving. Then a cold drop hits your face. Not from the sky, from the cave ceiling. Another lands on your shoulder. The floor underneath you is damp. The hide over your legs is damp. The air itself feels wet. And suddenly the question is not how do you fall asleep? The question is where exactly can a human body lie down in this place and still wake up tomorrow? For ancient humans, sleep during a long rainstorm was never passive. It was a survival skill. Today, rain makes sleeping easier. It softens the world. It gives you permission to stay inside, dim the lights, pull up a blanket, and disappear for 8 hours. But for most of human history, rain made sleep harder, colder, and more dangerous. Wet ground pulled heat from the body. Shelter spaces got crowded, smoke clung lower, bedding rotted, insects moved in. And if the storm lasted long enough, rest itself became work. You were not climbing into bed. You were building the exact conditions under which sleep was possible at all. And that may be the first thing ancient humans understood better than we do. Sleep does not begin when you lie down. It begins hours earlier, when you choose the ground. Archaeology keeps finding the same pattern over and over again. The safest place to spend the night was almost never the most obvious one. Not too close to the cave mouth, where wind-driven rain and runoff could reach you. Not too deep in darkness if you needed the fire. Not too close to the flames, where sparks, heat, and thick smoke would make long rest miserable. Ancient sleep was about finding the narrow strip between wet and smoke, between cold and suffocation, between exposure and entrapment. That is why one of the most important prehistoric technologies was not a spear or a blade. It was a bed. At Border Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found grass bedding dating back at least 200,000 years. Not random grass. Not plant debris blown in by the wind. Actual bedding, laid in sheaves near the back of the cave, on top of ash layers. The researchers argue that those ash layers may have helped discourage ticks and other biting arthropods. Think about what that means. 200,000 years ago, humans were not just looking for a dry place to collapse. They were constructing a sleep surface. Softer, cleaner, safer, more insulated from the filthy, insect-heavy floor below. And that behavior did not vanish. At Sibudu Cave, also in South Africa, people around 77,000 years ago were building plant bedding from sedges and other grasses, then topping it with aromatic leaves containing insecticidal and larvicidal chemicals. By about 73,000 years ago, they were burning old bedding, apparently as part of site maintenance, then replacing it. That is an astonishingly familiar idea. Not just find shelter, not just stay warm, clean the sleeping area, refresh it, control pests. In other words, if the rain kept everyone trapped inside for days, the place where you slept could not just be tolerable. It had to remain livable. And this matters because the ground itself is a problem. Bare earth steals heat. Damp earth steals more. If you lie directly on it night after night during a wet spell, you are giving the cold a straight path into your body. A layer of grass changes that. It traps air. It lifts you off the mud. It creates a buffer between skin and stone, between sleeping flesh and a floor that has been sweating moisture for days. That sounds small until you remember that in prehistory, small differences were often the entire difference. A slightly drier sleeping surface, a slightly warmer back, a slightly lower chance of waking up shivering so hard you cannot function in the morning. But not everyone slept in caves. And that is where the story gets even more interesting. At Ohalo II in Israel, a site roughly 23,000 years old, archaeologists found the remains of brush huts with evidence for grass floor coverings and bedding. The sleeping areas appear to have been arranged mostly near the walls, while the center of the hut was left for other activities, including the hearth. So even in a constructed shelter, the logic is the same. You do not just throw yourself down wherever there is room. You organize domestic space. Fire in one place. Work in another. rest in another. And if rain had pinned a group inside one of those huts for days, that organization would have mattered even more. Because cramped shelters become unbearable very quickly when nobody can leave. Now add the fire, because rain turns sleep into a negotiation with fire more than anything else. You need it close enough to keep people warm and to dry the air around the living space. But you do not want to sleep inside the thickest smoke. A recent study modeling smoke dispersal in Lazaret Cave in France found that the placement of a hearth could create specific zones more suitable for long occupation, while other zones filled with denser smoke. The possible resting areas aligned with the more breathable parts of the cave, not the worst of the smoke plume. That means ancient humans were likely solving an architectural problem every single night, how to stay near heat without choking on it. And when rain kept them inside around the clock, that problem did not disappear at bedtime. It got worse. So how did they actually sleep when the rain did not stop? Probably not deeply. Probably not all at once. Probably not with the total unconsciousness modern bedrooms train you to expect. We cannot excavate a fossilized night's sleep, but ethnographic evidence gives us a clue. In one study of Hadza hunter-gatherers in Tanzania, researchers found that across the night, someone was awake, or in a light, easily roused state almost the entire time. The group was simultaneously scored as fully asleep for only a tiny fraction of observed time. That does not prove Paleolithic people used the exact same pattern, but it strongly suggests something important. In risky environments, human sleep may have been collective, staggered, and semi-alert. If the rain was drawing predators closer to shelter, or if a flood-swollen stream could be heard somewhere in the dark, complete vulnerability was a luxury. And that also helps explain why ancient sleep was probably social in a way ours often is not. In a storm, you want bodies near you. Bodies are heat. Bodies are warning systems. Bodies hear things, smell things, wake when you do not. Older people, lighter sleepers, nursing mothers, anyone tending the embers, anyone reacting to the sound of water changing outside the shelter, all of them become part of the night's defense. Sleep stops being an individual event and becomes a group behavior, not perfect rest. Shared vulnerability, carefully managed. There is another detail most people never think about. Long rain does not just make nights miserable. It changes when sleep feels possible in the first place. Research on present-day hunter-gatherer and other pre-industrial groups suggests that human sleep tends to begin as nighttime temperatures fall and to end near the coldest part of the daily cycle. In simple terms, people naturally drift off as the world cools. But during a wet spell, cooling is not soothing. It is a warning. If your bedding is damp and the fire is weak, that nighttime temperature drop is exactly when rest becomes most expensive. So the evening work of ancient sleep was really about preparing for the coldest hours before they arrived. Dry the bedding as much as possible. Preserve the fire. Choose the least wet patch. Keep the children closest to warmth. Then lie down. And some of the most familiar things in human life may have grown directly out of that pressure. Maintenance, cleaning, rotation of living space, seasonal knowledge, the instinct to put the sleeping area here and not there, to save the driest plant material for night, to burn out old bedding and lay new, to leave one zone for smoke, one for warmth, one for rest. Rain did not create sleep. It refined it. It forced ancient humans to stop treating shelter as a hole in the rock and start treating it like an environment that had to be managed. A sleeping place was something you engineered. And here's the part I love most. If you could step into one of those shelters during the 4th or 5th night of relentless rain, what you would probably see is not chaos. Not people sprawled randomly on stone, waiting for dawn. You would see order. Grass laid where the floor stayed driest. Hearth placed where smoke could be tolerated. Tools moved aside. Children tucked toward the safer side of the shelter. Somebody still half awake near the embers. Somebody else listening to the rain and judging whether it was easing or getting worse. Sleep, yes, but strategic sleep. Defensive sleep. Human sleep is already mixed with planning, memory, and cooperation. So how did ancient humans sleep when it rained all week? Not on bare ground if they could help it. Not in the thickest smoke if they were smart. Not without fire. Not without bedding. And probably not without someone, somewhere in the group, still partly awake. They slept on grass and ash, on mats of sedge, near walls and away from the drip line. in huts with defined sleeping zones, and in caves where the breathable air mattered as much as the roof overhead. They slept in ways that were cleaner, more organized, and more deliberate than most people imagine. And maybe that is the real answer. Ancient humans did not survive bad weather because they were tougher than you. They survived because they were better at preparing for discomfort before it arrived. They turned sleep into technology. They built it out of grass, ash, heat, airflow, timing, and trust. So when the rain kept falling, and the dark pressed in, and the cave floor stayed cold for another night, they did the most human thing possible. They did not just endure the night. They redesigned it.